I'm excited to have some time this week and next week to kind of start a new series entitled When Your Way Isn't Working. And we're going to be looking at and having a two-part conversation. Today is going to be a part one, and then next week's going to be part two. That's right, exactly. And what we're going to be looking over and walking through is a book that our men's focus groups did over the course of the spring called When Your Way Isn't Working by Kyle Idleman. He's a pastor of a church in Louisville. He also is an author. He wrote the book Not a Fan, for those that are familiar with that book back in the day. And our guys got together, about 35, 40 of us, over the course of some time. They broke up into smaller groups. And this book, for me, was a challenge. It was pretty incredible. And there's some things that I think were important enough for us to spend a couple Sundays right here in August kind of talking about because of what is expressed within the book, but not only within this book, but within this book, within the Bible. And what I love about where we're going to go today and we're going to go next Sunday is how for us, especially as followers of Jesus, there are just some things that are so important for us that we really need to take some time and kind of reflect upon, especially the words of Jesus when he says certain particular things. And in order for us to get there this morning, I do need to tell you that as I tend to, from time to time, to start my talks, let you know that we live in a wild and crazy world. We live in a fast-paced, 100-mile-an-hour world, and it just doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. Your schedules are jammed. My schedules is jammed. Your time that you spend just out in the world and doing all the different things from work to play to your family to your friends to just trying to take a deep breath, it's like overwhelmingly fast. And what's interesting is that I also have noticed that when it comes to the world we're living in, the information that we're receiving with like very little pace. Like, as a matter of fact, the amount of stuff that we get into our minds and we have to process is almost as fast as anything there could possibly be. And I think it's having an impact on how we think, on how we prepare our days, on how we communicate with people, on what we say yes to and what we say no to. And it's something that is honestly like a cultural crisis that we found ourselves in. Matter of fact, as you get a little further into this book, Kyle does a great job of kind of explaining a little bit of that. And he shows and kind of presents a couple of just stats that kind of blew my mind as it relates to the amount of information that we as human beings are taking in nowadays. This first thing that he noticed that he recorded in his book was written by a researcher named Casey Phillips. And this is what it said. It said, every 2 days, we create as much information that was produced from the beginning of time until 2003. I'm sorry? Every 2 days? We create now as much information in the high-speed world that we're living in that was produced from the beginning of time until 2003. That sounds like a lot. Is that a lot to you? That sounds like a whole bunch of time. It sounds like we've got a filtering kind of a thing that we've got to be kind of figuring out because the information just coming at us and it's not slowing down and we've got to be able to process it. And there's this other thing too that another researcher named L. Scott, she said the average cell phone user gets 63 and a half notifications every day, and each notification alerts them to a piece of information that seems urgent. 63 and a half sounds light. It sounds like it's not a big deal. Like, I feel like I get 63 and a half before 9 o'clock in the morning. I feel like my phone is buzzing, pinging. By the way, her book's called One Ping After Another, which is pretty funny. But what's funny about it, and what's kind of scary about it, is it's just true. Like, you get so much information, you get so much new knowledge that gets brought to your attention that you've got to do something with it. In my case, what I typically do is I try to answer every single thing as fast as humanly possible. If I get a text, I try to reply back to it almost immediately. If it's an email, if it's a ding, if it's something on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, like I'm trying to always just be up and in the know and right in the middle of whatever it is, and it's making a difference. It's impacting our world in some sort of way. And I'm not sure how good of an impact it's actually making. And I'm not so sure there's something that we need to be doing as it relates to our souls and the soul keeping that we're supposed to kind of do, especially as followers of Jesus. And as a result, I think that there's a way within which we are living our lives in the middle of this cultural, like, high-speed world that we're living in that we as followers of Jesus need to kind of slow down, take inventory, and kind of pay attention to. And the more I thought about this, the more I thought about this book and this book here known as the Bible, the more I began to think about the ways within which we live our lives. And Kyle does a great job of kind of explaining that within the book. And there are kind of, in my estimation, three ways within which we live our lives, especially in the world that we're living in now. We have our own way, which our own way is kind of devoid from all things Jesus. It's just like what we think, what the culture has been informing us about, like all the things that just might sound great to us, but there might be some consequences that might have some negative impacts on ourselves and other people, but we don't care because we're just going to do things our own way. And then there's the Jesus way. The Jesus way is like the Jesus way, where we lean into the scriptures and we understand what God's word has to say, and we're following along closely with the text, and we're allowing the words of Paul and Peter and John and the rest of the New Testament writers and Jesus himself in the Gospels like inform us on every single thing that we're doing. Like we don't go where he's not leading kind of a thing. Like the Jesus way, especially for believers, is like, yeah, that's the way that I want to live my life. This is the space that I want to be in. This is the path, the center, the middle way kind of a thing that I want to be. And yet as I read this book and as I read this book and as I think about myself and I do a little self-reflection, I realize that I'm living like a combo way. Like I'm a combo way guy. I'm like over here. Like what I do is like I get informed by Jesus and his word because I've been a believer for over 30 years now. And I kind of lean into the scriptures, especially when things that are like super duper matter a lot kind of a way. But then there are these other things too that are like going over here in like my own way, like the over the Jesus way. And like I tiptoe over and I kind of look at like the culture's way of doing things. And I'm like, ooh, that might be a way that I can do something too. That might be good for me as well. So as a result, I'm kind of doing the world's way and the Jesus way. And I've got my own combination, my own formula, the Eddie formula of how I do things. And I feel like a lot of us, we're all in that same space. Especially if you know Jesus. Like we're kind of done with doing our own way. Like we're settled on the fact that Jesus' way is the best way, and yet the synthesization of that, is that right? Synthesization? No, synthesis of that is the combo way, is the combo way, and that's kind of how we do things. Now how we do that combo way, there's grades to it. Some of us are leaning way into Jesus, and some of us just have kind of maybe thought about that. Some of us are leaning away from Jesus during certain seasons and doing more of what the culture says and what we feel is best and going about our own business, doing our own thing. But whatever it is, we know that we need to be in a fight. At least we think we do. And the more that you look at the scriptures, the more you realize that the Jesus way is the way that Jesus wants for us to live our lives. And he is adamant and he is clear about it, but we have to realize that there is information coming at us at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And if we're not willing to filter in what's coming into us, we will find our combo way, sometimes even looking like our own way, and it's just no good for you or anybody else around you. So as we process through this, as we think about this in the world we're living in today, my hope is to just present to you some words that Jesus said that is filled throughout this book here, When Your Way Isn't Working, and also throughout the New Testament here, so that we can hopefully get a grasp and a grip on how sometimes when it comes to our own way, which we've thrown away, and this Jesus way, which we know we need to be living within, that combo way, we can realize that even in that, when we're trying our best to kind of do this Jesus way, sometimes our way just isn't working. And when we recognize that our way isn't working, what are we going to do about it? Well, what's amazing is that Jesus gives us a lifeline, as he tends to do within his communication to his disciples, within the Gospels. And there's some words that he uses in John 15 that are so good and so true that when you really think about it, you're like, oh yeah, like I just need to do that. But the problem is, we have a problem with that. We have a deep down rooted, gotta figure this out, get out of the combo way, more the Jesus way problem that hopefully over the next few minutes I'll be able to explain, and then next week we'll look at some of the solutions to that. So if you have your Bibles, we'll be in John chapter 15. We're going to read a statement that's very popular. Verse 5 says this: I'm the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me. This is Jesus' words to his disciples, and they're in an upper room, they're having a conversation. Jesus is like 2 chapters away from being arrested. He's about to be crucified, and he's letting his disciples know that there are some things that they need to know about him, they need to know about themselves, and he tells them, I am the vine. He's using a metaphor. I am the vine, you are the branches. I am the source of life. I am the way in which you operate is found rooted in me, who is rooted in the ground, who is getting the source of life. So I bring it to you, the branches, so that you can live and that you can produce fruit. And that last little piece that he says to them is that you can do nothing without me. And every time I read that, every time I hear those words, I immediately feel like a piercing to the heart, a punch to the gut. I'm like, ugh, what do you mean? How can you be so bold, Jesus, in saying that to someone who is reading this 2,000 years later? Yeah, I've been a follower of yours for 30 years. Yeah, I believe you died and rose from the dead. But how can you say, apart from you, I can't do anything? Well, what's interesting about Jesus is that he makes these statements all throughout the Gospels, if you remember. He has told people that he is the light of the world. Very exclusive statement to make, I would say. He also said he's the bread of life. He's also said he's the door, he's the gate. He's also said he's the good shepherd. And right here he's saying he's the vine. He is letting them know, these people that are listening, the disciples themselves, that there is some exclusive rights that Jesus has, that the Father has given him, and that his miracles and the words that he is sharing, and then his eventual death and resurrection all prove that everything he's ever said about himself is not just a suggestion or not just a good idea, they're absolutely the truth. And anything opposed to what Jesus has said, because he is the truth, is what? False. And Jesus is making a super duper bold claim, not in a sense of, hey, I'm God, even though he is. He's saying, hey, in order for you to live life, really live life, you have to be connected to me. Because he says at the end of that statement, you can do nothing. You can do nothing without me. Bold. A time for us, I think, to reflect on what that statement truly means. Because when I think about that, I think about the fact that me as a dad, as a father, as a friend, as a pastor even, like, I begin to ask myself a question. Are we sure about that? Are we sure about that? Are we sure, Jesus, that I can do nothing without you? Because I know there's been seasons of my life where I've been a dad. Like I've done some things, and I haven't really noticed necessarily like your involvement and your influence in my life, or me being a husband. Like there's been moments and seasons where it's been okay. It's been okay. But the more I go down that path of thinking to myself, Jesus, can I really do anything without you of real, true value? I immediately feel like this just feels not like the right question to ask. Not only that, it feels like there's no way I can answer that positively with any real good in my life. Because I immediately come back to this understanding that the ways in which I've lived my life in alignment with Jesus' way, the better my life has been. And the good that I have at being a father and being a friend and being a son and being a pastor, it's all predicated on me being connected to Jesus, remaining in him. So when I hear this statement, I recognize how true it ultimately is. That we really cannot, as followers of Jesus, do anything truly, truly good without him. And we need to understand that. And we need to recognize this metaphor. We need to realize how good it is for Jesus to say, and for us to understand that Jesus is the vine, and that we are the branches, and that we should stay connected and bear fruit. That's all we have to do. Those are the two things that branches just have to simply do, guys. Stay connected and bear fruit. Stay connected and bear fruit. That's it. Jesus is the source of all of who we are. Jesus is the one that's given us life. Jesus is the one that's helping us kind of pick through all the things going on in our lives and giving us the best filter possible within his word to know how to glean and understand the information that we're getting from the culture. His words have been preserved for over 2,000 years thus far, and it will continue on for the next 2,000 years short of him coming back. And he's telling you and telling me that if you're okay with being a branch, if you'll stay connected, you will bear much fruit. You'll produce blessings for other people in your life. You will let people know more about what Jesus is doing in your life than what you're doing in your life. You'll have this turning over of yourself and this growth that is just supernatural. And I don't know about you, but I would rather lean more in that direction, more of the Jesus way than the combo way that I find myself leaning into. And I think that's where Jesus wants us to kind of feel when he says, you can do nothing without me. He creates this tension for these disciples, and it extends and echoes to us some 2,000 years later. What I love too about what Kyle has to say within his book is that there are some things that kind of manifest when we're trying to do our life our own way, and even that combo way, and not the Jesus way. Some things that as I read through these little, what he calls dashboard signals going off, that kind of give us an indicator of what is really kind of at the heart level going on when we're not as connected to Jesus as we could be. Because we should be connected to Jesus in all the things that we do, and in the way in which we filter in all the things that we get in our life. And even if we think it's a good thing, but it's not a God thing, we should be willing to just step back and say, okay, let me assess this real quick and figure out what God's best is, and let me just try the Jesus way. Because we know, right, as Christians, that we should be leaning more and more into the Jesus way over the course of our lives. That the totality of our faith shouldn't have been summed up in our teenage years. That the maturity of who we are should be more and more like ramping up as we get closer and closer to our day where we're no longer going to be here on the planet Earth. And that's kind of where we need to stay. But the problem is when we don't recognize that our way isn't working, this combo way I would call it, when we don't recognize it, we kind of forfeit our ability to kind of get back on track. But when we do recognize that our way isn't working, then we can put ourselves in a much better space to see what God only wants to do and can only do in our life. But there are some emotions that are involved when our way isn't working that we need to be aware of, because it will help us understand that we're living more in the way that we want to live, kind of this combo way, and a little bit, not so much in the way that Jesus wants us to live. And there are 4 things that Kyle mentions that are just there. It's discouragement, it's frustration, it's fatigue, and it's anxiety. Anybody been there? Right? I mean, we kind of, this is it. This is kind of the thing. We find ourselves here a lot of times. We find ourselves here, and how we deal with the way we're here is also interesting as well. And what's interesting about the discouragement that we find ourselves in, especially for me, is how do I handle myself in these moments? And why do I get so discouraged when things don't necessarily go my way? Like, if everybody just did everything that I wanted them to do, my life would be so much better. Yeah? I feel like you're going to agree with me on that. If everybody would just align their wills and their ways with my will and way, I would no longer be discouraged. Everything would be great. And yet, when I am in that space, I tend to just get over it, push it down, when I should be running to Jesus and doing my best to reconnect with him and be encouraged by who he is and how he loves. And we're going to get more of those details next week. But also the frustration of life. The fact that there are just moments where I'm like, that's it. The volcano is about to erupt. All these things going on in the world are driving me nuts. The guy in traffic's driving me nuts. The way in which I've wanted to do certain things and how things have planned out, like they just, all of it fell apart, and it wasn't my fault, and some of it was my fault, and I get frustrated with myself, and then it's like just this moment of like, ah! Like you don't know what to do. You spaz. And then you end up blowing up on your family. You end up getting mad. You end up coping with these things in ways that are just not healthy for you. Instead of you going and just reconnecting to Jesus, realizing that, hey, I'm probably in this place because I'm trying to do things out of my own, my little combo way. I'm leaning more into the culture than I am to Jesus. I'm trying to pick myself up when all I need to do is just rest in him. Which then leads to the next piece, the fatigue part. We're tired all the time. The energy drinks that people consume daily are a testament to that. By 2 o'clock, people are cooked. We can't do anything. If we don't have a 12-ounce can of something, just we're done. Done. I thought I was tired for like 6, 7 months. I would go home, I would plot my schedule so I could take a nap, and I'm not afraid to say this, around 2 o'clock every day. Give me 30 minutes, I'm ready to jam. The problem is, on the other side of my nap, I would drink an energy drink. Why would I go from so low to so high so fast? What was I doing to myself? I realized that, hey, I probably need to adjust my diet a little bit, maybe, move a little bit more, and I won't be so tired during that time of the day. And then I also had some medical stuff happening too with my heart that I wasn't so sure about. We'll talk about that in a few weeks later, a little more in detail. But once I got all that figured out, guess what? I was still tired. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that I carry my job, I carry the responsibilities of being a husband and a father, I carry them heavy. I don't carry them light. And when I carry them heavy, I'm carrying them in a way it's just not Jesus. I'm making it about me. I'm thinking things like, oh man, if I don't, it won't. And if I can't, then it's never gonna happen. And I have the best people in the world that I work with. I have an incredible family. And yet I get into those spaces where I just feel so tired. And it's because I'm just not as connected to Jesus as I could be. And I need to move from this place of disconnect to this place of connection. And again, we're going to talk more about this next week. And then you got anxiety, which everybody has a little just dash of it, chronically, I think. We're all dealing with it. And I think it has to do with the information that's overwhelming us, the media, the social media, the pings in our pocket, all these things, the way in which we're operating, the way we hold on to just everything, the stresses of life, the saying yes to everything has given us no breathing room whatsoever. So we're always on that edge. And that ain't it. Definitely not God's best. None of these things are where God wants us to live and to stay. But just like everything else I've mentioned, we have to be willing to make that move over. To be reconnected to Jesus. To realize that he is the vine and we are the branches. And we will remain in him and he in us. We will bear much fruit. But you can do nothing without him. And it's that moment, that statement right there that should sober us up and should help us remember how important and valuable all of this is. You see, Jesus uses this metaphor because he wants his audience, his disciples, to think about what it would look like for them to be apart from him. And Kyle, the guy that wrote this book, toward the end of the book, spoiler, he has a stick, he says, in his office. And I have a stick right here on my little table. And this stick is probably not as cool as Kyle's stick. Kyle probably has a cool stick. It's probably a little bit bigger. It's probably like a walking stick almost. I just found this in the little pathway between my neighborhood and the neighborhood between my neighborhood. And it was like 9:30 last night when I found it. It was wet, it's dried, it's nice. But what's interesting about this stick is that it's no longer a branch. It's a stick. Branches are connected to whole trees. Trees that have root systems, trees that have life. This is a stick. It's been snapped off from another branch probably, which is also from a trunk. And this is good for pretty much nothing. It looks okay. It could be thrown and fetched by a dog. It could be lit on fire at a fire, but it's not going to bear any more leaves. Because apart from the branch and the other branches on the tree, it's of really no value. And I think for a lot of us, we forget that as it relates to how we're in this relationship with Jesus. I think for a lot of us, we think that our relationship with Jesus is predicated on what we do and what we want and how we think about the world and what we think is best. And instead of us doing what he has called us to do, which is be connected to him, to worship him, to go to him in prayer, to spend time loving other people like he loves us, to confess our sins to him, to have this super tight-knit, just grown up kind of a relationship with him. Instead, we're just sticks, doing stick things. And the saddest thing is that there's so many of us, for so many seasons of our life, where we're just okay with that. But that's not okay. That's not okay. It might be okay for you and your little special moment, but you have people around you. You live in a world that has family in it and friends in it and people you work with in it. And what they need from you is for you to be connected to the vine, connected to Jesus, so that you can continue to just bear fruit and show them this God who sent his son into this world to fix what was going on the inside of them, just like he did for you. And I would be silly not to make that appeal to you, not to let you know that apart from Jesus and without him, you can't do anything, because this is something that I've been thinking about through the decisions that I've been making since I started reading this book. Because when you finally recognize that your way isn't working, you start to make some changes. And this is what God wants for you to understand. And when you hear and feel things like discouragement and frustration and fatigue and anxiety, and that becomes more of who you're known for, then we know we've got to make some adjustments and shift some things around in our life so that we can be more about that Jesus way and not so much that combo way, leaning toward our old own way that just doesn't work. So, as we kind of wrap up, I just want to remind you of a few things and encourage you with one big thing. And it's to simply be a branch. Be a branch. We need to let Jesus be a vine. We need to let the Father be a gardener. And we need to embrace this metaphor and produce much fruit. Because in John 15, in chapter 1, and in verse 4, Jesus said this: I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He's the one working all of this out. Verse 4, remain in me and I in you, just as a branch is unable to produce fruit by itself. Yep. Unless it remains on the vine, neither can you unless you remain in me. And then he said, verse 5, I am the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produce much fruit without me. And because you can do nothing without me. This is the sobering moment, I think, for a lot of us. We need to recognize where we are and where Jesus is in the way we're living our life. And if you're in this room and you do not know Jesus, I encourage you to find out more about him. Talk to someone that's maybe invited you here and let them tell their story about who Jesus is. Because he has a way for you. Because he made a way for you to know the Father, to know him, to have the Spirit of the living God inside you. And for everybody else in the house who are followers of Jesus, we do realize, yes, that apart from Jesus, we can't do anything. And the more we are aware of that, the more we realize how much we need to be connected to Jesus. And the beauty is next week, we're going to talk about what that looks like. And I'm so excited about this. Because next week, we're going to have a moment, a time, where I'm going to have another conversation with someone else. Matter of fact, it's one of the greatest people that I know. He does a lot around here at River City. His name is Ken Nick. You guys know Ken? And Ken and I are going to talk about the solutions to the problem and how we can not only get reconnected to Jesus, but stay reconnected with Jesus, that we can be moved more in his direction so that we can remember that Jesus' way is the way, and that we can begin to push whatever that combo way is that we're living our lives even that a little further away from who we are and how we are remembered and how we're living our lives. Because as I mentioned before, you do not live your life by yourself. You have family. Some of you have kids. You have parents. You have people that you work with. You have people who know you, know Jesus. And it's high time for us to recognize that that connection is the most important thing about us. And I cannot wait to get into next week so we can talk about it.